Well, reports suggest the Trudeau government is moving forward on marijuana legalization. According to the Globe and Mail, the government is working to draft legalization legislation, that's fun to say, and hopes to have a bill in place next month. In fact, sources tell the paper Ottawa is hoping to have a bill in place ahead of the symbolic date of April 20th, aka 420. That day is recognized by marijuana activists to celebrate cannabis culture. And for more on this story, we're joined now by CP24's Cam Woolley. So, Cam, how much red tape is there involved with pushing something like this forward?
Well, there's a ton of it, Gurdeep, and one of the things the federals are going to do is they're going to look at not just legalizing, but the whole process of the intensity of marijuana. They're also going to be looking at impaired driving, and that's one of the big keys. The feds got a lot of support for legalizing it, but they could lose a lot on social responsibility. One of the reasons former Chief Bill Blair's involved in this. Now, the current Canadian Criminal Code has an offense of impaired driving, which includes alcohol or drug, and that is when an officer forms an opinion somebody's ability is impaired. That's not really going to change. The big issue here, Gurdeep, though, is a legal limit. We have it for booze. 80 milligrams of alcohol and 100 milliliters of blood, or BAC. Everybody knows that. 50's a warrant, 80's if you're over 80, that's a criminal offense. What about drugs? What's the limit? Nobody knows yet. So the scientists are going to have to determine that. They'll also have to determine what other products might be involved, everything around production, labeling, that sort of thing. And then it will be up to the province to look at distribution, taxing, pricing, and then local politicians look at things like the zoning bylaws of where the stores could even be. Back to you.
Okay, that's our Cam Woolley with that angle of the story on Queen Street West. Let's stick with this story now and bring in our Stephen Ledrew. Stephen, we always hear the terms legalizing and we hear the term decriminalizing. What's the difference between the two?
Good question, because there's hardly anybody who is not in favor of decriminalization. No one wants a 16-year-old, a 17-year-old to be caught with a joint and have a criminal record for his or her the rest of their lives. It's just it's a terrible thing. It should have been done 20 years ago. So that's the one thing, Gurdeep, is the decriminalization. The other thing, legalization, which is what Mr. Trudeau promised in the last election, is very different. That is legalization of marijuana use for recreational use. It's not even, medicinal or anything like that. This is just say, hey, you want to have a beer, you can have a joint. It's as easy as that. Mr. Trudeau has to carry through with this one to get back the millennials that he lost when he reneged on his promise to change the way of voting. That was a big deal up into leading up to the last election, to change the way of voting. When he reneged on that a few months ago, people are saying, you know what, he's not really the real deal. So he needs this before the next election to bring it back. The question is then, Gurdeep, what are the rules? As Cam was pointing out, how much can you use? What about driving? How about detection? Jane Philpott is a medical officer. She is a Minister of Health. What are her views on allowing an 18-year-old to smoke marijuana for fun? How does she feel about that? What about the health risks? And what about the fact that there's been stories recently about a lot of other things in marijuana, such as other different drugs? So how are we going to deal with that? And there's also under the Constitution, while the feds can allow it, it's the province that are going to be regulating it. So are the provinces ready? Do they have an apparatus in place? We are leading up to a provincial election here in Ontario. If they're looking to have it in place by next July 1st to celebrate Canada Day, I can have visions of Mr. Trudeau up on Parliament Hill in a year and a half from now smoking. How is the Premier going to deal with that? More on that next half hour. Good evening. Back to you.
Stephen, thanks for that.